Have you ever seen The Wizard of Oz?
The Wicked Witch of the East, bro!
You know, that classic film that has transcended into an important piece of cinema and Americana? The same one that's been parodied 1,000 times, but never gets to be outdone? Yeah, that one. But did you know there was actually 7 adaptations of it before the 1939 Judy Garland one? Some of the images from these are kind of scary to me, honestly, and some are just lost completely. In 1900, L. Frank Baum wrote The Wonderful Wizard of Oz book, and he followed it up with 14 sequels. He's also responsible for 4 of those 7 adaptations that I mentioned before. Baum named his main character Dorothy as a tribute to his 5-month-old niece, who ended up passing away in infancy. So one major change from the book to the movie is that Dorothy is actually a little girl. So early on, they had Shirley Temple considered for the role. She actually auditioned for the part as well. But when she sang, it was concluded that it was too much for her, so they ended up not casting her. In comes in 16-year-old Judy Garland. To look younger, she had to wear a corset and was actually told to lose weight on a diet of chicken soup, black coffee, and cigarettes. What the f***? Louis B. Mayer, who's the producer and co-founder of MGM from 1924, actually called her a pig in pigtails. What the f***?
But some people without brains do an awful lot of talking.
But Hollywood failed Judy Garland as a whole, not only from help from her own mother, but the studios as well were shoving these things down her throat. They did it so she would lose the weight, and also later on in her career, they would also use it to knock her out for around 4 hours, just to wake her up again, to have her work for 72 hours straight. Luckily, these bullshit Hollywood practices aren't done anymore, but even still, Hollywood failed this young lady horribly from the start. But even with all this against her, her performance in Wizard of Oz is brilliant. She approaches everything with this clear maturity and sense of right and wrong, even with the young age of 16. But who knows if this change of making her older actually made the movie better or worse? I believe that it was made better simply because of Garland's performance throughout this movie. She's brilliant. Please make sure to stick around because later in the video, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the differences between the book and the 1939 movie. But for now, I wanted to touch upon the Wicked Witch of the West. So she was first modeled after the evil queen from Snow White and even tested out Gail Sondergaard with that design. This whole movie was actually made in response to Disney's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. But MGM didn't want a hot witch, and the actress didn't want to be ugly either. So in comes Margaret Hamilton. I really hope this doesn't sound like I'm dissing Margaret Hamilton. I'm not calling her ugly, but she was down to play the part. I loved her performance throughout this whole thing, and you appreciate it more as an adult, because as a kid, she scares the bejesus out of you, especially with her voice. That's the most scary part of her.
I'll get you, my pretty, and your little dog too.
Edwin, who you may know as the voice of the Mad Hatter and Uncle Albert in Mary Poppins, was offered the part of the wizard, but actually declined because he felt the part was too small. W.C. Fields was almost casted as the wizard as well, but wasn't due to salary disputes. So Frank Morgan was casted and actually ended up playing 5 roles in the film. He's Professor Marvel, the wizard, the gatekeeper, the carriage driver, and the guard. I always thought that it was actually the same guy, like it was the wizard pretending to be those guys to try to check things out. I always thought it was always the wizard. Let me know what you guys think. Bert Lahr was casted as the lion, whose costume weighed over 100 pounds and was allegedly made out of real lion skin. Yeah, imagine sweating in that thing. Horrible. Ray Bolger was initially casted as a Tin Man, but he felt that he'd play a better Scarecrow, so after some convincing, MGM made the switch. Buddy Ebsen was then casted as the Tin Man, and like all the actors, he went through hell with the whole makeup screen test phase. They were trying to figure out the design and the look of each character. I must say, still to this day, the way the textures on the Scarecrow's face looks, plus all the hair all over the place, I think I like his makeup out of everybody's. They would even argue amongst themselves who had it worse, but I think without a doubt it was Buddy Ebsen, because as the first Tin Man, they had aluminum dust on his makeup, which he ended up breathing in and getting into his lung, nearly dying 10 days into production. So it took months for him to recover from this, so the Tin Man had to be replaced. So in comes Jack Haley, who replaced him as the Tin Man. They didn't use the aluminum dust anymore, but they did use aluminum paste for the makeup, which led to Haley getting an eye infection. The Wicked Witch had her own troubles with the paint as well. Because it was so toxic, she couldn't eat solid foods in fear of accidentally digesting it. So she had to be on a pure liquid diet throughout production. So needless to say, shooting The Wizard of Oz was not fun at all. As if toxic face wasn't enough, in the scene where the witch first leaves, red smoke comes up and a trap door opens up from the bottom for the actors to jump in and hide in. The first time they did it went smoothly. They decided to do it again, and this one wasn't so smooth. They weren't in sync, so the trapdoor didn't open up in time, which led to the actress suffering severe burns to her hands and face, which actually took her 3 months to heal herself. Also, the scarecrow's face would melt onto the actor's face due to the lights being so hot, so this whole experience was completely miserable. Coupled with the fact that they shot for 6 months, shooting 6 days a week, it sounds horrendous, especially from back then.
Oh, I'm not feeling at all well.
The first song is arguably the hit of the movie, but it was almost completely cut out. Harold Arlen and Yip Harburg wrote the music of the entire film, but actually felt that there was a bigger musical number missing somewhere. So as Arlen went to go get Chinese food one day when he wasn't feeling too well, he stopped at a drugstore as well. The melody just came to him one day, so he rushed home to jot it down. But like I said during editing, this song almost was completely cut out of the film. Which, by the way, if you haven't seen this movie in a while, you forget that every single song is great and iconic. And there's just like simple things that I didn't notice before, like the violin strings in this transition from Follow the Yellow Brick Road and We're Off to See the Wizard. It sounds so vile and mysterious. There's something wicked about it. No pun intended, really, I swear.
You're off to see the wizard, the wonderful Wizard of Oz.
But speaking of iconic, the color change from sepia to Technicolor must have been crazy back in the day, especially because of how saturated they made the colors. People still think that this was the very first movie to have color because of the change, but it's actually not. But I can still appreciate the sets to this day. Just look at Munchkin Land. The sets are pretty awesome. It's also a pretty well-known fact that some of the Munchkins would show up hungover and behave completely inappropriately throughout production. And I'm talking 1930s inappropriate, so you can only imagine what that'd be. Some instances included tormenting Judy Garland and even hitting on the 16-year-old. Her ex-husband even claims they even tried putting a hand up her skirt. They would spend most of their off time drinking at local bars and getting arrested. And because they had a focal point in the movie, they knew that the studio was just going to come and bail them out regardless, to the point where the studio had to assign them a handler. Imagine being the Munchkin handler. They're probably older than you, but they're all tiny, and they're just running around drinking, sexually assaulting people. What a mess. I do have a theory about this, by the way, because they were just plain destructive throughout production, obviously costing the studio money somehow, right? But I think it's all retaliation to the studio because the dog who played Toto made more money than any of the Munchkins. So I think they were rebelling and decided to just act out. They probably took it as disrespect that the dog makes more money than they do. And I kind of get it from that standpoint. Sure, make a mess, cost the studio a ton of money, but leave Judy alone, man.
We represent the Lollipop Guild, the Lollipop Guild, the Lollipop Guild.
This is not the end of the Munchkin theories. Theories suggest that the dummy that's hanging in the background is there put on purpose to symbolize the oppression of the Munchkins and the hard life of the normal working Munchkin. This is the theory of experts. Us common folk thought it was an actor who committed suicide. I think that's the most popular one. And I think of this just because of the simple fact that in the re-releases, they just ended up replacing it with a giant bird, just to eliminate all theories.
We're off to see the wizard, the wonderful Wizard of Oz.
The links to Snow White continue. After Dorothy and Scarecrow meet the Tin Man for the first time, in the middle of the song you can hear a voice.
Sings low.
Wherefore art thou, Romeo?
This is actually Snow White's voice actress Adriana Caselotti, who's actually uncredited because of her contract with Disney. My favorite is by far The Lion. He's my MVP. Of course, let me know yours down in the comments.
Then I'm sure to get a brain, a heart,
A home.
the knife.
I just love him. Anytime he opens his mouth, the false sense of courage he has.
Put 'em up, put 'em up.
He's beautiful. King of the Forest is my favorite song.
Fie, fie, well, king.
Because he's just so funny. He brings the comedy relief, and he does it without trying to take over. Even Garland thought so. In one scene, she kept ruining a bunch of takes. So director Victor Slemming, why did I keep saying Slemming? So director Victor Fleming actually slapped Judy Garland due to her uncontrollable laughing and giggling during the lion's intro. And if you pay attention, you can actually see her smirk covering her mouth with Toto.
Is my nose bleeding?
Well, of course not. My goodness, what a fuss you're making.
Let's not forget Judy is 16 years old. And he just pulls her aside and smacks the shit out of her. Well, he felt so bad that he actually ended up asking the crew to punch him in the face. But instead, Judy kissed him on the nose. It just goes to show the type of person Judy Garland was. Just an innocent soul that unfortunately Hollywood of that time just ate her up. She's a hell of a talent too, man. Even at 16, she's laughing and can still have the ability to deliver that line. But still, Judy Garland goated, man. So if I were to ask you, what does the Wicked Witch tell the monkeys before she sends them off? If you said, "Fly, my pretties," you're wrong. Don't worry. I thought so too. I thought she would say, "Fly, my pretties." But no, that's actually a Mandela effect. She only calls Dorothy my pretty. So she never says, "Fly, my pretties."
Now fly! Fly!
She also tries to send poison to the crew with the tulips, and she fails. In real life, obviously in the movie they fall asleep, but the one who actually ends up sending them the real poison is Glinda the witch. In the movie she uses snow to wake them up, but in real life that snow was actually asbestos. Unfortunately, this cancerous item was always used back in the day to simulate snow. DC and Marvel actually teamed up for the Wizard of Oz comic book. And because of that team up, now that comic book is wildly valuable. So there's a ton to this movie. I'm obviously not going to mention every single behind the scene or every fact. So make sure to let me know the ones that you are the most interested on down in the comments, as well as the comparisons from the book and the movie, theories, anything at all. Let me know down in the comments, because I just picked the ones that I found the most interesting, like the differences between the book and the movie. For example, in the book there's no ruby slippers, they're actually silver. The change was made so that they would look good on screen. Also, a tornado's not the one that attacks the house, it's actually a cyclone, and the book is way more violent than the movie. For starters, they have way more encounters.
What do you think you're doing?
In the book, there's more obstacles in their way. First, the witch sends out 40 wolves, which the Tin Man decapitates, then 40 crows that the Scarecrow kills, and then 40 bees that the Tin Man kind of sacrifices himself, letting them sting them, knowing that they will die shortly after. A reference to this is actually said in the woods.
And you! I'll use you for a beehive.
But also, our pals' origin and motivations are actually different. In the book, the Scarecrow is only 2 days old. He actually already knows that he's a lesser man than the man who created him, and a crow lands on him and tells him that the brains are the only thing that are worth having in this world, which starts the motivation of his journey. The Tin Man was actually a woodsman who was in love with a Munchkin, but the Wicked Witch ended up cursing him so that his axe would cut off a limb with every swing. So after being chopped to pieces, a local built him back up with tin, but wasn't able to give him a heart. And with a new heart, he can be able to marry his Munchkin shorty. The lion is pretty similar. He is a bit more sad and alone in the book because of how much he strikes fear into everything. At the same time, he's afraid of everything. So that's why he wants the courage, so he can just be the king of the forest. In the end of the book, our heroes are actually captured by the witch, separating the boys from Dorothy and having Dorothy do housework, which leads her to being super fed up and dumping her mop bucket full of water onto the witch, leading her to her melting.
I'm melting! Melting! Oh, what a world! What a world!
Also in the book, it isn't a dream. She actually does travel through the cyclone to a whole new different place. So that element adds a totally different perspective in the differences between the book and the movie. There's actually so many conspiracies that I don't have enough time to go through all of them, but A couple interesting ones are Glinda actually being evil. There's a lot of evidence there if you look for it.
She came down in a bubble, dog.
And also the movie syncing up to a Pink Floyd album, which that one was actually debunked by Pink Floyd themselves.
Is bullshit. Is it bullshit? Yeah, of course it is.
This movie is so rich in content, in lore, then I can see and I can be easily persuaded for all the conspiracy theories. I can buy them all easily. I can understand what it all represents. But I think the ultimate message is much more simpler than that, and it's just said by Dorothy.
If I ever go looking for my heart's desire again, I won't look any further than my own backyard. Because if it isn't there, I never really lost it to begin with.
To appreciate the ones you have around you, to not take them for granted, because at the end of the day, there's no place like home.